Wallach on Law examines criminal cases and criminal justice and asks the question, we are tough on crime, but is that helping? Can we be smarter and make us safer?
You want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Ian Wallach is a criminal defense attorney and civil rights lawyer in Los Angeles and New York. His cases have ranged from defense of the accused to the prosecution of governments in their treatment of convicts. He's a former Los Angeles deputy public defender and a frequent contributor on legal issues to radio and television shows nationwide.
You're out of order! You're out of order! The whole trial is out of order!
You're gonna need a bigger boat. This country, our courts are the great levelers. In our courts, all men are created equal.
This is Wallach on Law. Here's your host, Ian Wallach.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, and welcome to this week's edition of Wallach on Law. I'm your host, Ian Wallach. A special hello to our new listeners in new territories. Very thankful that you are on board to spend a little time joining us and listening to this conversation. And today's conversation is about exoneration. And to understand exoneration, we're going to be speaking with two very special guests. Our first is Cynthia Orr. Now, Cynthia Orr is one of the most accomplished criminal defense attorneys in the country. And she's going to come on and she's going to talk about some of the hurdles and the roadblocks and the randomness that can take place on the road to exoneration. And then we're going to speak with Christopher Ochoa. And Mr. Ochoa is an exoneree. And his situation is... It's unique. Not so much unique. His conviction was the product of a forced confession, and we're going to talk about what it takes to make someone confess to something that they did not do, and how he was able to be one of the rare few individuals who gets their convictions examined and then ultimately overturned and exonerated. But first, let's talk about some legal news. In Annapolis, Maryland, a detective accused of murder during an incident of road rage has been acquitted. Now, this was a very racially charged trial. The defendant, Joseph Walker, he was black. Detective Walker, he was black. And the decedent, Joseph Harvey Jr., was white. There was multiple claims of prosecutorial misconduct throughout both the grand jury proceedings and the trial in this matter, and it concerned the withholding of Brady evidence. Now, this is evidence that the prosecutor is supposed to put forward or turn over because it's favorable to the defense, and that certainly didn't happen during the grand jury proceedings here. Almost didn't happen at trial until the defense counsel was able to learn of it independently and have it be court-ordered. Well, the jury got the case, and after about 6 hours of deliberation, Detective Walker was acquitted on all counts. And he was represented in that matter by Charles Curlett. And Mr. Curlett was a guest on the show before. He came on to sort of talk about a change in Department of Justice policy that relates to the recording of witness interviews, and that's going to come into play during our conversation later today with Mr. Ochoa. But I want to tell you, I once did a trial with Mr. Curlett, and he's a great attorney. But during closing argument, the audience of the courtroom became filled with officers who had worked on the case. Everyone came in at the DA's order who had worked on the case to just sit in the pews while we did our closing arguments, and this was clearly done to impact the jury. I objected, but it's a public forum. My objection was overruled. In Detective Walker's trial, during trial and closing argument, the audience was filled with fellow officers of Detective Walker and supporters of the defense. Now, who is in the audience is not supposed to affect a jury's thought processes, but it does, and prosecutors have known this and used it as a tool for years, and those caught up in the criminal justice system need to be aware of it, and if they can, use it to their benefit as well. Now, Arizona just had the fourth botched execution of 2014. The execution of Joseph R. Wood took over 2 hours. Arizona's Attorney General has issued a temporary halt on the practice. Now, Mr. Wood's attorneys claim that he received 15 times the standard dosage of a painkiller and a sedative. The United States Attorney General Eric Holder has now called for disclosure of the contents of these death cocktails, these combinations of medicines that are used in these executions. But I don't think this is going to happen, because disclosing a cocktail recipe could lead to discovering the identity of the doctor who prescribed the medications that are inside of it. And the American Medical Association and the American Board of Anesthesiology condemn a physician's involvement in execution, and it can be a basis to revoke their license. So states respond by passing laws and enacting measures that hide the identity of doctors that perform these procedures so they can keep their licenses and go on and treat other patients. Now, just to be clear, that means that governments and states help licensed professionals hide their identities from their licensing agencies so they can violate that licensing agency's rules. That's kind of like if you were to imagine hiring a lawyer. to teach a witness how to perjure himself effectively on the stand, but hiding that fact so that lawyer could still go out there and practice when clearly they should not. And lastly in news, I got to talk a little bit more recap on this Manassas warrant. I don't know if you've been following this. The backstory is a 17-year-old boy and his 15-year-old girlfriend were sending each other pictures of the private parts, and a parent of the girl found the phone and wanted the boy punished and filled a report, and the boy was punished. But he was charged with first, possession of child pornography for having the picture, and second, manufacturing child pornography for taking pictures of himself. And as you know, these charges have absolutely horrific life consequences. He was stripped, his private parts were photographed, and then the DA, the day of the hearing, the juvenile trial, the DA told the lawyer that unless he pled guilty, the DA was going to execute a warrant, the officers were going to execute a warrant that would force this boy to be taken to the hospital to have his privates injected to create a state of arousal so they could do another round of photographs that they were going to use as evidence in the trial. Now, the lawyer freaked out. They told the press inquired. The Manassas Police Department released a statement stating, no, we would never authorize such an intrusive practice, but didn't expressly deny doing so. And then later, journalism helped prove that this thing had actually happened. It did happen. They acknowledged that it happened. The practice was caught. The practice was stopped, at least for now. But let's talk about at least 5 reasons why this is all just so messed up. I mean, first of all, child porn statutes are designed to protect against a different, infinitely more insidious, much more heinous evil. Sending a text message with a picture of yourself when you're under the age of 18 does not render one, in my opinion, or most people's opinion for that matter, a child pornographer. Second, the Manassas Police Department issued a public statement that essentially denied that they got this warrant when they had. Okay, and this false release of misinformation, maybe they could say, rely on a grammar trick or whatever, this completely undermines the public trust. Third, in the name of fighting child porn, officials wanted to make child porn. That's so disturbing. Fourth, no one accused of a crime should be forced, as part of an investigation, to experience a far greater injury than they are alleged to have caused. And fifth, the Manassas Police Department lied. The DA and the officers who sought the warrant, well, they got caught. There's a judge out there that actually signed this warrant. And guess what's going to happen to these people in these agencies? Guess what's going to happen to them? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. They're still going to keep their jobs in juvenile justice, determining the fate and the futures of children. And simply put, that is one big mess. Okay, so we are welcoming to the show, in order to sort of understand the process and some of the hurdles of exoneration, Cynthia Orr. And Counsel Orr has an absolutely stellar reputation. She's a partner in the firm of Goldstein & Hilly in San Antonio. She's a certified criminal law specialist in both criminal law and in criminal appellate law. She's a past president of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, an organization I am proud to be a member of. She co-founded the Texas Innocent Network. But I could go on, but I want to mention 2 accolades for which she was recognized just this past month. This year, she received the highest award offered by the NACDL. It's the Robert Heeney Award, and if you were to distill down what it's for, at its essence, it's basically for being the best person ever. It's given to the person who embodies the principles of the organization to that highest extent, and she was the honoree this year. And she's also chair-elect to the Criminal Justice Section of the American Bar Association this year. Ms. Orr, welcome to the show.
Ian, thank you for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, it's. I'm really excited to have you here. But listen, it's sort of a somber conversation. Today we're going to be talking to you and to an exoneree, and we're going to be talking about the exoneration. And I think what people who aren't involved in the legal process, some of their questions, people think it's an easy process. They think, okay, someone claims they're innocent, it's easy to prove it, and they can walk out the door. And I'm pretty sure, right, that's not an accurate conception.
I could, you and I know differently. And, I think what most people don't realize is what a crapshoot it is for someone who's innocent to even get their case heard or investigated or defended by a criminal defense lawyer or the Innocence Project or nice civil lawyers who often give their pro bono hours to help in these cases.
And just to clarify, I think most people know what pro bono is, but that's just when a lawyer decides to work, for no money because they believe there's some injustice. and they want to vest their time. So I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's one of the proudest traditions of the criminal defense profession. I'm not aware of many other professions that engage in that kind of work to improve the system of justice. But that's, Ian, is where that crapshoot comes in, and by that I mean people that are lucky enough to have their cases worked on are just the luck of the draw. It depends on whether one of these lawyers has an open slot. They're scheduled to do some free work on one of these cases when the request comes in, or whether it's caught the eye of the Innocence Project, or whether a lawyer has the inclination to assist when they're called on to help. So,
and again,
I worry about the numbers of people that we never hear about.
Sure. And I guess the individual, I mean, it's frequent in my experience that individuals who are charged with crimes are able to be manipulated more easily by the system are individuals who don't really have skills as far as writing or communicating or expressing their ideas. And it seems like
any understanding, right, of what the process requires.
Yeah, so in that situation, those individuals, it's highly unlikely that someone's going to be like that. It's highly likely that anybody's going to be able to. Such a small percentage of people are going to be able to get to you, but
that's right.
Let's imagine that or take an example where one person is one of these very fortunate individuals, and fortunate is an odd word to use for someone who's been convicted of something that they haven't done, but they're able to actually get their letter to you on your desk during a period when you are actually have the time and are willing to give your own pro bono time, your own free time, to examine a claim of innocence, and you read the letter. What would your next step be?
Well, I would, of course, go meet them. Would talk to all their lawyers. I'd examine what the records revealed, and then I would start drilling down and seeing what the rest of the story is, because there's always the rest of the story when someone's wrongly convicted, whether it's a coerced confession, a jailhouse snitch telling a story to reduce their own criminal exposure, a falsified science dry labbing where scientists make up results that don't really.
What do you mean? I'm sorry. When you use the word dry labbing, what are you referring to?
I'm talking about bald-faced lies. That is, someone types up a report as if they've done testing when they haven't done any, and so the term dry labbing means there hasn't been any labbing at all, and so they just make it up to fit the police theory. Pretty common, and sad that we have a name for it because it's become so common.
Sure.
But there's any number of things that have led to the false conviction, sometimes really bad defense lawyering as well. And then helping to make sure that sees the light of day, hoping that you get a court that will listen to it and that you're not so far along in the proceedings where you can't raise the claims. But
let me stop you right there. Sure. I mean, could there be a time legally where, even though there might be some like rock solid, indisputable, newfound evidence of innocence, an attorney was precluded, or shouldn't there always be some legal vehicle? Even though all the appellate appeals are the processes are exhausted, there has to be. Isn't there always some way to reopen a case?
There's two so terribly shocking things. That is, one. In the vast majority of jurisdictions, the law does not recognize that innocence gets you relief, and that you need to have also some wrong and constitutional wrong in how your trial was conducted or the proceeding was conducted, or you may have been duty-bound to have discovered this information sooner, and because you didn't, you're just out of luck. So we've got that legal impediment that the law doesn't recognize that innocence is somehow a legal claim that opens up the jailhouse doors, and the Supreme Court's written about that and what a terrible thing that is. But the other thing that stands as a natural impediment is, and what I find most frustrating and mystifying, is that prosecutors tend to stick by these convictions after it becomes really evident to them that they ought to help you overcome these procedural hurdles, whatever they might do, and unlike the jailhouse doors, and let the innocent person go free. It's always surprised me, but you very rarely encounter an enlightened prosecutor, although they're out there, that says, "Oh my gosh, this is a terrible wrong. Let's fix it.
It's shocking. I know out here we have there's at least one judge I know who's a former prosecutor who actually devotes a fair amount of his time keeping in touch with people who he sent behind bars to find out if he wants to make applications for their early release. It's Judge Mitchell, but they are few and far between. Why do you think that is? Why would a prosecutor, or why would a bench officer, why would a judge be averse to potentially releasing someone who's doing time for a crime they didn't commit?
I think because these disenfranchised people have become politicized. It's, oh boy, I want to be known for unlocking the jailhouse door. I want to be known for being soft on crime. That doesn't get these district attorneys elected or the judges elected. In fact, there's this wave of anti-fairness sentiment that's used unfairly to try and defeat fair-minded people from taking the bench or becoming prosecutors, elected prosecutors. So instead of looking at what's fair and just as the professionals that we are, a lot of these folks are pressured into, I've got to think about what this means for my poll numbers, my election numbers, my popularity, and I just simply can't be a part of it. I've often
thought out here that a lot of people I know go into. I mean, I know some wonderful people who are prosecutors. I know some wonderful criminal defense attorneys who are former prosecutors. But there's certainly a sentiment. If I can show a prosecutor that my client didn't do the crime that he's accused of, one's even said, well, we're not in the business of dismissing cases. I've been told that he must have done something similar, and there seems to be such an angry mindset imposed upon individuals who are accused of something, and a lot of that I fear stems from people who decide to become prosecutors, and I don't know how to change it. It's probably a subject for another.
We're told not to care about these people.
Right.
They've lost credibility the instant they're charged, and then it's sort of like, well, let's all break the rules together to get this conviction, and then as Brady violations, that is, undisclosed favorable evidence unfolds or these injustices come about, it's the rare case where the prosecutor will say, as in Senator Ted Stevens' case, I'm sorry, we really can't stand by this conviction any longer. We need to overturn it. But, at that point, the damage is done. Or when a judge says, I'm going to call upon an investigation of this process and we're going to correct the wrong. The problem is there haven't been consequences when prosecutors have done this, and I think that our system needs to temper prosecutorial discretion and prosecutorial wrongdoing that currently is immunized by having some consequences apply when people have acted wrongly, and
I
so
think
that they lose the incentive.
We're beginning to see that just a little bit. I mean, and you were involved to that in some degree as regards the Michael Morton trial and the hiding of evidence that led to his conviction. And sadly, this is the only example of this that I know of. But where
it's the first time in history that a prosecutor spent any time in jail for intentionally hiding favorable evidence in a case that wrongly caused an innocent man to go to prison. I hope it's not the last time, but I hope it is enough of an impact that'll make prosecutors decide, I'm a professional, I love my law license, I'm not going to do that kind of misconduct. Sure.
Well, listen, if you're just joining us right now, this is Wallach on Law, and our guest is Cynthia Orr. She's with us today discussing exonerations. Now you've worked with exonerees, and both before they've been exonerated and after, and I imagine that for some of the same reasons that might have led you into the field of criminal defense, you've gotten to know these people, both during their periods of incarceration and afterwards. Is that fair to assume?
Sure.
What skill sets were made available by the state to help someone who's been wrongly convicted for a period of time re-enter into society?
Nothing's done. Nothing's done to help them re-enter into society. Not when they're guilty and serve their time, or when they're exonerated and they're suddenly released. They're sort of, like Rip Van Winkle, tossed into modern society without having had any assistance to adapt. And some do very well, and some do very poorly.
I have a pro bono case. I have one case that I've been working on, fortunately with the New York Innocence Project, And it deals with some conduct that exonerees, because a lot of them end up with substantial either substance abuse or other problems afterwards, and they say it's one of the clearest examples of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
Absolutely
what I was thinking. Yep, you're right, Ian.
And there are zero skill sets that are given. And when I was talking to some of the social workers over there, they said normally what the pattern is these people come out, they're well received because of a good social conscience, in the community, but they can't get jobs. And if they may, as many people do, self-medicate, turn to alcohol, turn to something else, and it's an absolutely disastrous problem, coupled with the fact that how do you throw somebody back in jail if the reason that they're not going along with the rules of society is society's problem?
Well, and these people were ill-equipped in two respects when they started down that road. One, many of them trust the system and think, well, I'm innocent, so I'll be acquitted. And they don't expect the sort of unfair, prejudicial sort of process they go through where it's presumed they're guilty. There really isn't a presumption of innocence. Jurors really don't do their jobs to protect them against the strength of the government and acquit them if the evidence is not there. And the second thing is many of them are just ill-equipped just generally. They're not intelligent. They're not well represented. They're sometimes young.
Makes them easy targets.
Police skills, they are. And but so, as Michael Morton said, where I go, you go. This could happen to you, and we do need to work harder to make sure it doesn't. And it's not letting it rest on the current Russian roulette system of, oh, well, this one's going to get reviewed because Cynthia and Jerry have time to work on it, or Barry project can do it, or John Rayleigh, civil lawyers willing to become involved. That's just not anything that we can be proud of and say, hey, the system works here. It doesn't. It's broken. And we need to do something more systemic about
right now,
vehicles that
when you talk about needing to do something systemic, I mean, there's over 200 exonerations now effectuated by Innocence Project. That's over 200 individuals who were locked up. That what I don't think people realize is that also means that individuals who committed over 200 heinous crimes were allowed to go free. I think
that's right, and kill and hurt again, and it's a public safety issue. It's not a bleeding heart liberal issue. We really need to get it right, not because it's morally right alone, but because we need to make sure that folks that are dangerous don't get to go kill again. And we know in Michael Morton's case that there was a cold case with Mark Allen Norwood's DNA there at the scene. He's the fellow who's convicted ultimately of really killing Christine Morton. Mm-hmm. And his DNA was at the scene of another woman who was bludgeoned to death with a young child. So it's so important, even for law enforcement, that instead of just closing cases, we try and get it right.
Yeah, we try to get it right the whole way around.
Right, and be open instead of retool our case when there's evidence that someone's innocent.
I think one problem that we're seeing is coerced confessions. A lot of people say, no one's ever going to confess to a crime they didn't do, especially a heinous crime. And I don't think, and we're going to speak to Mr. Ochoa a little bit, but I don't think people really understand that it's not a question of what kind of person would confess to a crime they didn't do, but really a question of what can happen to a person to make them confess.
Right, they're subject to really professional and scientifically proven skills that are used to get people to say what you want them to say. You can go home after you say this. We'll let you, leave our presence. We'll just say it, and things will go your way. And they think, well, I'm fine. I'm with a police officer I can trust. If they say I can go
sure.
home, that's fine.
What gets mind-boggling...
Officers, as we know, are allowed to lie.
Well, I understand that they're allowed to lie, and I mean, that may be troubling. That's separate. What really frustrates, I'm shocked by when I speak with these individuals is, how they'll stop and restart a recorded coerced confession after someone's beaten if the facts aren't right, and they're like, no. Okay, say it again, but this time the room was blue. Say it again, this time the room was red. And it seems to me that somewhere in that process they should think, hey, wait a second, he doesn't know.
Maybe we're wrong.
If I'm needing to tell him what the facts are, I'm guessing that I believe he doesn't know what they are.
Well, you'd think so, but a law professor who used to teach at the police academy told me one time that we make the wrong assumption when we think police are there to solve cases. They aren't. They're there to close cases.
Sure.
As soon as they can jam that round peg into that square hole, they're done.
They're done and they can go home.
And so I think that's the phenomena that you're talking about.
Well, I would add to it. I think they pretty much have they tend to be people. I mean, I know some very brilliant officers, but higher education's not a requirement. They're people who tend. A lot of the ones that I know are people who want quick answers, and they also are part of their job is the comfort in getting people to say what they want them to say, and it's a dangerous mix, especially when it comes to confessions.
I think some of it has to come with their training. I think a lot of well-meaning officers just get it wrong. I don't think law enforcement officers are stupid or ill-intentioned, but I think it's a part of culture, and they look at the rest of the world with really jaundiced eyes. And it's a matter of we're going to be patient until we can hammer at this out of this lying suspect, instead of thinking, wait a minute, he really doesn't know this stuff. Right.
Well, actually, and I want to talk to you about that. If you're just joining us, this is Wallach on Law, and our guest today is Cynthia Orr. We're discussing exonerations. And as you know, I think it was in July it went into effect, but there was a May Department of Justice policy memo that seems to be part of Eric Holder's efforts to sort of change part of the process. And this was the policy memo urging that suspect interviews be recorded. I know that's a it's a new memo, and it only says when practical, and it has lots of outs, but that certainly still isn't the policy, and rarely is the practice out here in California. Is it the practice in Texas yet?
We're very lucky in that it has been enacted
Fantastic.
and codified into law in state court. And, it's really been wonderful. Although, the question is, when does the recording start? That's always helpful. That, we're not having an interview begin in the police car or at the scene before we get someone in to the interview room. But we actually have an exclusionary rule that would exclude statements if they're not recorded. And it works really well.
That's fantastic. I mean, how did that? I'd love to know how that came about, because we certainly don't have that here, and we really need it.
Well, we had a very odd bedfellow in helping that go by, and that was Barbara Hervey, who's one of our justices on the Court of Criminal Appeals, who's very law and order. She was one of the people who promoted it because she saw it as helpful to law enforcement.
Because it is.
It is. It really is.
That's why. I mean, it gives them. It gives them. It gives them substantive affirmation of the information that they're trying to put forward.
Right. So I've never really understood why the FBI had this policy against recording statements. That just never made much sense to me. But you and I have encountered as defense lawyers how the statement is in the eye of the beholder, and oftentimes things that happen much differently are recorded in a different way by someone that looks at the statement from the perception of someone who assumes someone's minimizing or lying, or who they think they're looking for them to say certain things.
One thing I learned from about Mr. Ochoa's case that I was so shocking, and I'd love you to comment on it if you can in the few minutes that we have, is that there was a separate confession for the individual who actually committed the crime, and it was coupled and was able to be confirmed with DNA, and the law enforcement response was not to liberate him, but rather to try to again coerce him to make a confession linking him to the actual killer.
And I wonder how much of that is embarrassment and covering their own misconduct, and how much of it was really thinking that they were linked. But, that's the reaction whenever you provide evidence of innocence. It's not just in the context of coerced confessions. The first reaction of a prosecutor is, I'm going to retool my case to allow for this part of the story to fit into it, rather than saying, oops, there's something wrong here.
Exactly right.
it's stunning to me too. It happens every time, and I really can't pretend to understand enough to explain the phenomenon, other than at this point we're dealing with adversaries and folks who are fighting to win something, a contest, instead of people who really are looking at, my job is not only to represent law enforcement, but also to represent the citizen accused and to make sure we achieve justice. I don't think that job is taken seriously enough, not at any stage in the proceeding, not at any place or anywhere where our system of justice places that duty upon prosecutors and law enforcement. And I think it's time that we start holding people accountable for that part of their duty as well.
Well, hear. I know I fully support that. Listen, Cynthia, first of all, congratulations for your week and for all the awards that you deserved. Also, thank you for for giving your time and helping us sort of understand this process and because the more we talk about it, hopefully we can bring about some change. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us.
With your help and with your program, Ian, thank you so much.
If you want to learn more about Miss Orr, well, first of all, you can Google her. Her name is going to pop up absolutely everywhere. And you can read about just more recent work of hers in the Cameron Todd Willingham case, which is troubling because, as you will find out, Mr. Willingham might have been exonerated had he not been executed. But you can also, her website, www.ggandh.com, and they're in San Antonio, Texas. And it's just an absolute honor. It was an absolute honor to have her on the show. Now, Christopher Ochoa is an exoneree, and his story is exceptionally compelling. He was convicted of the rape and murder of a woman named Nancy DePriest, and he had no involvement whatsoever with the crime. What we're going to learn, and what's so troubling in his conviction, was largely the result of a forced and coerced confession. This is an issue that's been very much in the news lately, as you guys know, as a result of some changes in Department of Justice policy. But he's going to give us sort of his personal experience, and it's very kind of him to join us and tell us what that means. Now, in October 1988, a 20-year-old woman named Nancy DePriest was working alone at a Pizza Hut, and she was raped and she was murdered. And days later, Mr. Ochoa and another man named Mr. Danziger were arrested in connection with that investigation. Mr. Ochoa, thank you for being on our show so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
So I know it's going to be kind of sticky, kind of difficult for you to talk about it. I'm really thankful that you're here. But when did you first learn that you had been arrested for murder?
It was pretty. This murder and rape of this young woman happened at one of the local Pizza Huts in Austin, Texas. At that time, me and my roommate were working at other Pizza Huts. But essentially, the Pizza Hut where the crime occurred, it was closed for the crime scene investigation and all this kind of stuff. When they reopened it, my roommate was driving me back home from somewhere, and we were driving. The Pizza Hut where it happened was right on the way, right off the interstate. And he, for some reason or another, wanted to go see where the crime happened. Curiosity, I guess. Teenager. He was like 19. I was like 21. And, like my attorney said, that in itself is not a crime, but the suspicion. So we go into, he insists on going to Pizza Hut. We go in there, and he orders beer for both of us, which he ordered it. He was underage. Bottom, to make a long story short, he raises a toast to the memory of the victim in the restaurant. And then, to me, that in itself, we left shortly thereafter. They had a security guard posted there. My roommate starts asking questions of the,
and then I guess
crime and stuff.
That sort of triggered an amount of suspicion. When after were you arrested, and where were you taken when you were arrested?
I was picked up on a Friday for questioning by, and obviously the police department said, well, we're going to question you about a burglary. And being a young kid, I had never been in trouble before. I assumed burglary and robbery to me is the same thing. You're taking people's stuff, right? So, but at that time, when they tell me about the burglary, I said, well, because they had this crime that they had not solved.
Mm-hmm.
They had not solved, so it was pretty. So everybody, all the Pizza Huts knew about, all the employees. We knew that there was an unsolved crime. So in the back of my mind, well, when I asked the cop, so when they're taking me to the station, I asked them, "Is this?" When they said about the burglary, well, they drove me to the police station. I said, "Is this, just out of curiosity, is this about the murder at the Pizza Hut on, the young woman?" And they said, "No, it's not about that. It's about a burglary." Well, it was about. I was already a suspect at that time. Obviously, police officers are allowed to lie to suspects or whatnot.
Right.
But,
Sure. There's no prohibition on that.
Yeah. So then, the cops take me in and ask me a couple questions about a burglary, but all of a sudden, within 2 minutes, I'm being interrogated for this murder.
What was your initial response? I mean, do you remember what was your initial emotional response when you?
I said, I don't know. I mean, I don't know nothing about it. I mean, I don't know. And the cop, they send in the bad cop. He was the first one to come in. Well,
what did he? What? I apologize. There were several officers. When you say the bad cop, was he physically imposing? Was he vocally imposing?
All of it. Physically imposing, vocal, and he wasn't. At that time, I didn't know, and he was playing a good cop. There was a good cop, bad cop role, like in TV, right? But he comes at me and said, "What do you know about this crime?" And I don't know. I said, "I don't know anything." And then he says, "Well, why were you asking about the crime when our detectives came to pick you up for a burglary?" Ask you about a burglary. Well, he's lying to me. And so I said, I was just curious. And he says, "Nobody's just curious. You got to know something. Know something, and if you don't tell me what you know, if somebody did it and they came and told you and you don't tell us, we're going to charge you with capital murder and you get the death penalty." I mean, right? It didn't take about 10 minutes. He started
before they're telling you that you're looking at the death penalty and life on death row.
Exactly. Yeah.
What did you do? I mean, how does anyone respond to information like that, especially when they're innocent?
Yeah, and I told him, well, I know what you said, but there's nothing I can't tell you. There's nothing I know. I don't know anything about it. Well, I don't believe you. I think you're hiding something, and I'm gonna charge you. I'm not gonna play games. I mean, he walked out of the room. Then the good cop, right, comes in. My partner's just a hothead. I can calm him down. You know what? And then this is what got me, is that he said, "Just tell us what you know, and then you can go." So I was 21, so, okay, at this point, I had never been in trouble with the police department. And we're always taught as kids in school, the police department comes and tells us, right, all of us, that we're there to help you, we're there to protect you, right? So I was always in the assumption that that's what they were there for. So, so the guy, the good cop said, "Well, if you give us a statement, you can go." And that started wait a minute. You're saying I can't leave? So I already put it in my mind that I did not have free will to leave, although I did. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But that in itself, the respect I had for police officers, said, okay, I don't, and I didn't know. I just didn't know. So he walked out, and the bad cop walks in and starts issuing more death penalty threats, getting in front of my face.
How long did this process take? Was it a series of hours? Was it a series of days?
Yeah, it was the first one on a Friday was 11 hours, so it was pretty long.
And did they tell you that you had a right to lawyer? Did they just sort of read it to you off a form, or did they not mention it at all? What?
Well, here's what happened, and then so they're in between shuffling and questioning me. A female detective, a Spanish detective, walked in, and I thought, to me, in my mind, oh, she's a female and she should be more compassionate than these guys. So I asked her, "Do you think it's possible that I can get an attorney?" Right? And she turned around and gave me the dirtiest look. No, you cannot have one until you're officially charged. Well, I've come to find out that what I know through my attorneys and what
That's not the case.
I already invoked Miranda. Now, once I do that, they should stop. They shouldn't even.
Right.
But they kept on questioning me. They kept on. This was early on.
At what point after the questioning, how far? They didn't just want you to stand up and say, I withdraw a plea of not guilty. They wanted you to actually participate in the prosecution of you and Mr. Danziger. Is that correct?
Yes. And their whole angle was, didn't Richard Danziger tell you that he and your roommate did he do this? I said, no, I don't know. And I kept on because I didn't know. But as time wore on, he showed me pictures of death row of the cell.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't cooperate, this is where you're gonna live the rest of your until you die. You're not gonna be able to hold your family anymore because that's not allowed in death row. And I'm gonna make sure I'm there when they execute you. You don't cooperate with us. And then
what else changed? I mean, the human will is strong, but eventually there comes a point where anyone is going to crumble, especially when facing. No, especially when facing the forces of a government. What? How long were you? When did you crumble, and what made you crumble?
I think it was pretty. Several hours into the interrogation, I was just tired. I wanted to go home. I thought I couldn't go home, and they was just kept on. But I was already tired, exhausted. I just wanted to get out of there. But what triggered it, triggered me. So you know what? Just what do I have to do? I just want to give me whatever they wanted me to say. I just wanted it done, right? Because there was one point the police, the detective said, you know what? I am getting sick and tired of your BS. I am going to just book you. You've never been in jail before. I saw your record. I'm going to book you and throw you in there with the rest of the inmates, or you'll be fresh meat for them. So I took that to mean jailhouse rape, right?
Right, sure.
And that is when I said, you know what? What do you want? What do you want me to do? So that's when they read me the Miranda rights when I had already just said, But basically, they wanted me to say Richard Danziger was the one that did it. Mm-hmm. So bad cop pulls off the typewriter. He's giving me leading questions. Or
when you say leading questions, what do you mean?
Like,
is he?
Yeah, is it kind of like, okay, when you went in the pizza, this item was there, right? Or something like that. And I said, okay, yes, it was there, because I didn't know. Or that was the third question. That was the style that he did. I had three statements, but that's the style. Like in the first one, he said, well, Richard Danziger came and told you, right, that he did this, didn't he come and brag about it? And I would just repeat what he said, and then he would type it. That was the first confession on a Friday, and then Friday, and then I thought I was going to be able to go home once I signed I signed that statement, which he didn't involve. I was just putting all the blame on Richard, but I just didn't know. So,
I have to ask. I mean, I think what you're saying is that your will was so beaten down that you actually believed that if you confessed to a murder, you'd be let out the door. Is that?
Yeah. And I thought that, okay, I give him a statement, it'll be all sorted out by the defense attorney and the prosecution, and it'll be sorted out. Because the justice system we're taught that that's what it's supposed to do, right? People get accused, they sort it out. But that didn't happen. So, and then they took me to go give blood samples and all that, and then they put me up at a hotel on the weekend after that first statement. That's at that point when put me at a hotel because they said, we're afraid that Richard is going to hurt you because you did give a statement. So they told me not to see anybody, not to talk to anybody. So I ordered room service at the police department's expense, all that stuff. But at some point in that weekend, Saturday, I called my roommate. I said, you know what? I think my other roommate, I had like 2 or 3 roommates. I think I'm going to need an attorney. So, because I didn't have contact with my family actually, so I was already arrested. Because that was my first initial.
When they gave these recordings to you, These weren't recorded. They weren't actually like sound audio recordings, right? Or they were typings.
The first one was typing, but then they take me back on Monday. They pick me up to the police department and says, now we know, and this is the direct word, now we know you're guilty because you called your roommate and you asked her for an attorney, and only guilty people ask for an attorney. So now I take me for another 12 hours of questioning. These were audio tape. This second round of questioning, now they wanted me to give statements to the effect. The first statement in the morning, then the death penalty was still there. My mind was still mush. I was in jail. I had never been in there.
So, Mr. Ochoa, here in the cases where we have with coerced or forced confessions, the convicted party is usually exonerated in one of two ways, and I know both of those ways were at issue in your case. First is DNA. DNA can come up and prove that somebody else was ultimately responsible. The second is that the content of this person's confession doesn't have anything to do with the facts. It talks about a whole different group of people, different places. It just doesn't fit, and you can tell that it was written by someone that wanted the content to fit the crime rather than someone who was literally investigating a crime. In your case, did they make you go through different rounds of recorded interviews to try to get and stop? How did they get the right recording?
There was 2 rounds. The first one, it was just basically that I was, second confession they wanted, I was on audio tape that I was the lookout. That was pretty simple. It was like from the day before. But then they wanted further, now they wanted me to be inside the Pizza Hut. And that one was being recorded, but because I didn't know the facts, they had to stop the tape and say, wait a minute, wasn't it this color? And I was guessing, and they had to, they would stop and rewind the tape.
Unbelievable.
And then once they clarified it, they would run. Then they would play.
Were these audio tapes ever made available to you or your defense counsel in their entirety during the defense?
I would not. I could not answer that. The one thing I will say. But the one thing I will say, once that they were having the third audio tape, the second audio tape they were having trouble because I didn't know the facts. So at that point, one of the detectives threw a chair at my head because he got frustrated because I was like getting it wrong. And then at that point, the other detective said, "You know what? Why don't we just type it?" So they started typing the confession, the alleged, confession, false confession. And then, so once that happened, then I was arrested. And then, but later on, years later, when I had civil attorneys, when the post-conviction process came up, and then my attorneys, the Innocence Project, came in and tried to help me, what they realized is that one tape that I was saying that I was getting it wrong because that one tape that they wanted, that for some reason was missing.
Unbelievable.
My attorney called me and said, "What happened? Where is this tape? There's not." So the attorney figured it out because when you go interrogation, you got to mark down the time it came in and came out. So there was a 4-hour lap between the final confession. There was a 4-hour gap in there.
Right.
So that's where it was. So they actually.
Now, in your case, even that wasn't enough to even get you a retrial or an acquittal, correct? It took
because my defense attorneys dropped the ball. They never investigated they never even bothered to look at the confession, the facts, does it fit? The DA, the prosecutor didn't do her job either, which is her job. If your linchpin is that confession, and most attorney, and now I'm I'm an attorney now. You, like you said earlier, you corroborate these. Nothing was corroborated. Nothing. I mean, this only falls apart because of DNA and Innocence Project that starts really digging.
Right. Now, Mr. Ochoa, there was actually what also contributed was a confession, right, by Mr. Akim Marino.
Right.
And he confessed. Apparently, he confessed in a series of letters that were disregarded, including one to George Bush when he was the governor. He titled a murder confession, but even that didn't immediately result in your release or retrial. Is that correct?
That's correct. I went to prison in about 19. Actually, got convicted, and they sent me to the prison. 1990. This guy started, I think, confessing in 1996. And I didn't get a visit from the police department until 1998.
Unbelievable.
but even then they were not trying to clear me. They were trying to link me and Richard to this guy.
Unbelievable.
So there was no links to be made. Then once that in '98 when they came and questioned me, I was a lot smarter then. I was older. I just shut down I just said, you know what, I did, and I did tell them, you know what, because this was two reasons I did this. I said, number one, you started to play that bad cop, good cop. I don't want to talk to you. And you know what, I did the crime. Let me do my time. There are two reasons why I said that. Because watching I saw the Shawshank Redemption while in prison, and I know how that ended. I said, wait a minute. If I start, and behind my mind, if I start saying that I'm innocent to these guys, what if they have something that they'll destroy that proves my innocence? I just want them to think that I'm still claiming this. So I ended the interview, and immediately I went to try to get a hold of Barry Scheck. And then that led me to Wisconsin Innocence Project. Then they stepped in. But what I realized later, that the detective, and it was a Texas Ranger that came to see me to talk to me, What little did I know is that those two guys were actually, they smelled something funny. When they actually, that detective that reinvestigated, he started actually looking at the confession.
And
he said, there's no way.
So that's pretty admirable. It means that there's individuals. It's not all bad apples. There's individuals who go to this job because they believe in this job, and they're willing to even call into question the conduct of their comrades in order to effectuate justice. Now, Mr. Ochoa, one thing that that we deal with that I've come to learn, especially I do a little bit of a pro bono practice with some exonerees and releasees, and there seems to be as a common occurrence dealing with to an exoneree is the infliction of PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. Do you believe that that's true? And was any training therapy provided to you by the state? And what could we do to these people who are now being released after periods of confinement for crimes they didn't commit?
I think there is currently no therapy, no psycho. I literally had to pay out of my own pocket out of a lawsuit that I was successful on. But there is no therapy. I think there's some states that are starting, and and there's people lobbying different state legislators. And that's one thing I've been adamant when I do go lobby for either DNA statute or anything to try to help the system. And one thing I tell these lawyers that are lobbying, or whoever is not lawyers, but the groups are like, you got to address the therapy. Nobody's giving us therapy. PTSD is real. I was diagnosed with severe PTSD, one of the worst cases this psychiatrist has ever seen. He didn't anticipate. He pretty much in my reports. The report said it's going to be difficult for me or anybody on a foot that is coerced into a false confession, or cops manipulate them because they're in a position of authority. I now don't trust even the doctor, the therapist.
Sure, that makes total sense.
So it's never in this. That's going to be with you there, and I try to deal with it as much as I can. I'm really, very fortunate that I had the support, that I had wonderful civil attorneys, wonderful post-conviction attorneys that were there, and a lot of these exonerees, that's all they have is the Innocence Project. The attorneys are there, but it's not the state. Just throws us out, no money. Even like parolees get more benefits.
And I have no network, no support. Years lost of education. It's not like it was probably easier for you to get a job. I mean, it sounds pretty. But what you did was become a lawyer, right?
Yes, I did. I became a lawyer. I was my lawyer. One of my lawyers, before I was going to be released, he sat me down. He said, "Chris, this is this case when it unravels in the media, because it was pretty prominent even and have people even China or people from overseas know about the case. People, especially in the United States, they're going to be troubled because you had never been in trouble, and it's going to shake people's faith in the system, in the legal system." He said, "But you don't have to do it, but it would be nice if you came out and say, hey, try to, don't try to speak. You know, see, you know, it's not, the system is not.
Well, did
you? The people.
Let me ask. I mean, did you lose faith? I mean, do you think it's a broken system, or do you think it's a system that works and that has some flawed players or some flawed occasional political motivations? What do you think it's a broken system, or is it one that just needs to be? How would you describe it?
I think it needs to be tweaked. I think the system, the justice system, and the way the founding fathers of this country, you look at it, whether it's checks and balances among the government branches. In the justice system, the same thing. You got the prosecutors. That's why it's an adversarial system. You get the prosecutors, the defense attorneys. Everybody trying to look over, you know, trying to catch it. But I think some of the players in the system get caught up, either DAs, politics. They want to get a conviction so that they can win. You know, they can win election. Police officers want to get promoted. And I'm not saying everybody in the system is like this, but defense attorneys get jaded, they've done it too long, they don't know when to get out, so they don't do the actual effort. But this system is designed, it is one of the best systems in the country. It's got to be, it just needs to be tweaked.
That is such an admirable thing to hear from someone who is subjected to what you were subjected to. Now, Mr. Ochoa, do you have any advice for people who are incarcerated but maintain their innocence, or for the loved ones of individuals who are incarcerated and maintain their innocence?
Well, I think the best thing they can do is the loved ones. If you feel that your loved one or your relative, your brother, son, husband, whatever, wife, daughter, if they're in that situation, just reach out to the Innocence Project. And, you know, the Innocence Project, they have projects now, 12 years, 13, 14 years out. They now have pretty much Innocence Projects all over the country. And where if your loved one is in California, you got Innocence Project in San Francisco. You got one, I think, but you got one, there's several of them in California. Mm-hmm. Texas has got a couple of them. Wisconsin's got a couple, and then you got the big one in New York that's in the flagship. But they're all public. They're even setting up Innocence Projects in Australia, in Japan.
It's impressive, but also it's also. I mean, these people can write a letter to the Innocence Project, but the Innocence Project is pretty inundated. What do you wish? What were some of the most supportive words that you ever heard from your loved ones while you were inside?
The biggest support is the first thing is they never gave up on me. They were there. And the one thing my dad taught me, he said, you know what, they've accused you of this, but you know what, you behave in prison, show them that you're not that type of person. Don't go act like a knucklehead. Just do, he says, hard, show them that you're not this animal that they say. And I did. I followed and I was a model prisoner. And
well, you've been more than that, than a model prisoner. I mean, Mr. Ochoa, what you endured is incomprehensible. It's just incomprehensible to me. But the fact that you're willing to speak about it, to share your story, is not only incredibly admirable on your part, but hopefully it will bring about change, not only as far as quality and caliber of defense, but oversight and prosecution. In hopefully making skill sets available to individuals upon release. Thank you so much for what you're doing, and thanks for being on my show. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right, well, that's going to wrap up our show. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening in. A very warm thank you to our guests, Cynthia Orr and Christopher Ochoa. If you want to follow what we do, go to renovatejustice.com. And if you have any thoughts or any comments, send those to me at change@renovatejustice.com. I also maintain a blog at trialfiend.com, and you can contact me directly at wallachlegal.com. Special thanks to our producers, Mark Goldman and Ryan McCormick in New York. And remember, folks, let's keep using our heads. Let's stop using our hate. I'll see you next week.